All right. So once again, good evening, everybody. So this is Vignesh here, and today our session would be on security and compliance in Office 365. All right. So as you see in the slide, this is going to be part one of this session. So this is going to be a series of sessions. So I thought that I'll run this on different parts. So I'm planning close to 4 parts. So let's get started. All right. So I'd like to welcome you all first. Thank you so much for taking your time this evening. I understand this is a Saturday and I know how important this is for most of you folks. And thank you so much for taking your time outside and trying to join my session today. So we have a lot to talk today. I have so much of information, right? So I'd urge you all guys to grab a cup of coffee, some water, rest down for yourself and, start paying attention. I'll sort of try to make sure that this is interesting to you. Let's make it a bit interactive. So just in case you guys have any questions or any doubts, please feel free to put it on the chat. And if at all you feel that you want that, want even the other participants to hear about it, you're most welcome to unmute yourself and hear it. And let's begin. So guys who are not talking, or please mute yourself. This is gonna be a disturbance for others as well. Thank you. So who's this guy? So myself, I'm Vignesh Ganeshan. I work as a technical manager for SharePoint and Office 365 in Bangalore at India. So in addition to my work, I also write articles for C Sharp Corner, European SharePoint Community, and Collab 365 Hubfly blog site. So that's my Twitter handle, my Facebook details, as well as my LinkedIn details. And for folks who have been reading my blog article, I believe you would be aware of my website. If not, so that's my blog site details there. And in addition to that, I'm the organizer for the SharePoint and Office 365 Nerds meetup group in Bangalore. Okay, so that's pretty much about myself. So as we speak more, let's get to understand each other. So this evening we are going to discuss, so let me set the right context for you all folks, as this is going to be the part one session. Let's call this as a primer session or an introductory session to security and compliance, right? I'm pretty sure most of you folks would be working on Office 365. So before I even reveal my agenda, can I get some hands, or can you guys tell me, like, or put it on the chat, like how many of you are working as Office 365 administrators today? Or how many of you are playing the role of an Office 365 developer? Okay. And how many belong to managing SharePoint, Exchange, on-premises, something of that sort? Uh, okay, cool. And how many are from the security side? Maybe SOC operators, people who are working as a CISO, or people who are part of the IT security operations, things of that sort. So anybody from that area? So if yes, it's better you put it on the chat so that I can make sure that it's interactive and I cover your area as well. All right, fair enough. All right, so let's get started with my agenda. So this evening we are going to discuss. So we'll be understanding the threat landscape, because as you know, with the introduction of cloud, of course, we have started becoming more productive, but at the very same time, it has opened doors to more threats as well. So we are going to spend some time understanding how the threat landscape is doing these days, right? We are going to understand what sort of threats are coming in. We are going to understand what's exactly happening with all these things, okay? And then we are going to spend a few minutes talking about Office 365 and how Office 365 can help in your digital transformation, right? So in these days, I believe almost all the organizations out there are going through this digital transformation phase. So we're going to understand how Office 365 can help you in that route. Then we are going to see what is a modern workplace. I believe this is something which is happening in many organizations these days, because most of us as employees, right? So our employers have given us all these great laptops, maybe a Surface Pro with Office 365 and all those kind of things, which we call as a modern workplace or as a digital workplace. So we'll sort of understand what a modern workplace means. And then we are going to see what is the problem that we are currently facing in a cloud first, mobile first world. Okay, so that is really the key of this session. We need to understand what is the problem and how Office 365 is going to help you to address all these problems that you're facing in your day-to-day work. And we are going to talk about Office 365 defense in depth multidimensional approach to customer environment. So this is something really key because I believe most of this information which I'm going to talk under this topic is something which you guys may not have read about, or which you may not have really paid much attention to, right? So this is really exciting piece, so I'm going to talk a little more detail about that. So we are going to see the Office 365 security and compliance offerings, and then CASB, right? So the Cloud Access Security Broker, we are going to understand what a CASB is. I'm pretty sure most of you folks might have heard this word called as CASB because it was coined by Gartner roughly around 4 to 5 years back, right? So he feels, and from Gartner Summit, it was told that so CASB is something which every organization should be looking forward for. So I'm going to help you folks understand what is a CASB and how this can help to enhance the security in your Office 365 ecosystem. And then SIEM, so security, identity, and then we are going to see about what is MDR and then what is CASB. So I'm going to show you a small comparison between these three technologies, what it means, and how this can help you to enhance security. Okay. And finally, we are going to do a recap and then we'll do a conclusion. So I have a long list of agenda. So with no further ado, let me get started. So let's have some fun. So people just put on the chat. So which one do you think is a hacker here? So just by seeing this, can you just put me on the chat, like the one on the right or the one on the left? So any idea or anything which you guess, it's okay. You could feel free and tell, hey, this is whom I think as a hacker. Okay, someone thinks that both is a hacker. Okay, that's fun. We can't predict. Okay, so that's exactly the point that I'm trying to make, right? So you cannot determine a hacker by his personal appearance or by the way he is dressed, all right? So because hackers are around us, it's not necessarily a need that a hacker would dress himself like something weird, like the guy who's looking with all this mask on his head and a pretty lady sitting next to side. She's considerably not a hacker. That's not the case, right? And it is quite hard to find out who's doing what. It could be a malicious admin, it could be your internal employees, right? It could be someone who's sitting out there and sending all these malicious stuff to get hold of your environment. That's so it's quite not possible, or hackers don't reveal themselves with all these kind of weird dresses and all. So it's quite impossible, and this is the problem, right? So we don't really understand who's doing what. So today's security landscape, right? So most of us are heavily dependent on all the social networking sites such as Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and most of us know, and I believe most of you folks might have got hacked. Most of your accounts might have got hacked, and this is something which is happening around. So this is what's happening with the social media network, and this is just not for this, it's true for your business as well, right? And so businesses across the globe, it could be IT services, it could be manufacturing, you could be a healthcare organization, you could be anyone. And almost all the organizations in today's world, they are focusing on digital transformation just to increase their brand value so that they can really compete more with their customers, just to enhance their business, right? So an Office 365 is a service which leads the transformation. One moment, I'm hearing some. Okay, and Office 365 helps to lead this transformation, right? So as of today, the current momentum is such that we have 100 million active users in Office 365, 100 plus, right? And we have 89% of Fortune 500 organizations, which is heavily using Office 365, right? They have shifted their complete collaboration piece into Office 365. Maybe they were using SharePoint on premises, Exchange on premises, or it could be Lotus Notes or whatever. But now almost all these organizations have shifted towards Office 365 because they see that it's more valuable when they're running the service on the cloud. And when it comes to Microsoft themselves, 43% of annual growth in commercial revenue, right? So 43% of Microsoft's revenue is given from Office 365. And as you all know, so Office 365 stands out to become the world's #1 SaaS solution, right? So how many of you, or let me ask this question. So any guess or any idea on when Microsoft introduced Office 365? Can I get that on the chat? Just a random question. Let's see. The year, folks, do you folks remember the year when Office 365 was introduced? It's okay to be wrong. Maybe you could just put it on the chat. Any wild guess? No, not 2000. That's way too early. Okay. I see a right answer.
2007.
Nope. Okay, I see a right answer from Srihari. So yes, and Jayanti, yeah. So Office 365 was launched on 2011. It's 2011. So any idea what was the the successor for? I mean, what was the predecessor for Office 365? So was this service really new, or was this something else before? Any guess on that, guys? So is the platform Office 365 something new, or
Because
yeah? So that's right. So BPOS was the
BPO,
service. Yeah. So BPOS was the service which we had before Office 365. It was the hosting environment for that, right? So let's move on. So with a service called as Office 365, right? Your classic workplace. When I say classic workplace, it is your working environment, right? You go into your office. Maybe I believe I have folks here who have roughly around 10 years of experience, or it could be 5 years of experience, or you could be a fresher, or people with 15 years of experience in the industry, right? So let's go back. Maybe myself, I have 7.5 years of experience. So initially, when I joined IT, what we used to have is, maybe CRT monitors or computers around. We used to get connected to the corporate network. Of course, we used to have VPN, but we didn't really get to enjoy the liberty that we are enjoying today, right? Let's say like working from your mobile devices, right? Working from a remote location, working from home, getting access to all your corporate data or all your business data right from the place where you're sitting right now, right? So this was not possible before. And with Office 365, we get a chance to move to this modern workplace. And this is what has been driving the digital transformation in all the organizations, right? And so I was talking about a modern workplace. I hope you folks in the agenda. So this is my view of what a modern workplace looks like. Okay, so this is how I see it as. So this is my view, and let's understand what a modern workplace really is. So you folks have a Windows 10 operating system or a Windows 10 laptop which is given today. It could be a Windows 10 laptop or a Surface Pro. I believe most of the organizations today, at least the big numbers whom I know, so almost all the employees have been given a Windows 10 laptop. And then you have your Office Pro Plus, which is installed on those Windows 10 laptop, right? And then it could be you guys are having Exchange Online for your email solution, and then you folks are having SharePoint Online for your document collaboration and co-authoring, and then you folks are using Skype for Business Online for for your meetings, chat, all those kind of stuff. And then we have OneDrive for Business, which is sort of your personal storage on the cloud. Everyone gets to enjoy 1 terabyte of storage on the cloud. And then you have your Azure Active Directory, which sort of takes care of identity management when it comes to the cloud. And then we have your Office 365 groups, which is once again a collaborative tool which sorts of brings in all the features of your SharePoint, Exchange, your planner, right? So we have a new solution that is out called as your Office 365 groups. And then we have Microsoft Teams, which is really huge and one of the best collaborative tool that Microsoft has ever come up with, right? So Microsoft has already made the announcement that eventually your Skype for Business Online will be replaced by Microsoft Teams, but they haven't given any tentative date because Microsoft is eventually working on developing their next on-premises version of Skype for Business. So even that is coming. So there is no such date saying that this is when your Skype for Business is we are gonna deprecate it. So both the solutions are running parallelly, and whatever new features are coming on, you would see that whatever is coming for Skype is also coming for Microsoft Teams, if at all you take a look at the roadmap. And then we have your planner, which sorts of helps to plan your tasks. And then you have your Power BI, which sorts of helps you understand how your data is doing, and all the analytics can be done using Power BI. And then you have Power Apps, which is sort of replacing your InfoPath forms, one of the most troublesome part which we had in SharePoint. And then you folks have your Microsoft Flow, right? So this is something which is replacing your SharePoint Designer workflows. And then you folks have Yammer, which is sort of your social collaboration network inside your organization, something similar to your Facebook, wherein that is for the public and this is inside internal to your domain. And then you have Delve, which is sort of your profile when it comes to Office 365. And with Delve, you get your your My Analytics as well. Then you have your Office 365 video to share videos and to upload videos. Then you have Stream as well, and Microsoft Dynamics for business solutions. And then you have your Intune, which takes care of your mobile device management as well as mobile application management. Because before we had many vendors in the market, such as your AdWatch, Mobile Iron. There used to be so many players when it comes to mobile device management, but with Intune comes with your, the EMS piece. It comes as a chute, right? And then you have Microsoft Forms, which is sort of replacing your survey list forms, which you used to have in SharePoint. So anyone who has used Microsoft Forms, you know how simple it is to build a survey, right? And then you have your Enterprise Mobility Suite, the complete suite, which has your Active Directory P1, P2, as well as your EM security, EMS security. Everything comes intact with that, right? And then your My Analytics, which is part of your Dell, which sort of it is a analytics engine which is running on the back, and it helps you understand how you've been so how much time you're spending on meetings, how much time you're spending on Skype calls, right? It just gives you an insight on how productive you are, right? And the idea is to keep the user in the center and think about it, right? So just imagine an employee in your organization who has been empowered with all these tools. Just imagine how productive he is going to be, right? And all these tools can be accessed from anywhere. All it needs is just an internet connection. It's not necessary for you to come to your office, be connected to your corporate network, and work. So this is the idea behind a modern workplace, right? You get to access your data from wherever you want. You can just get things done on the go. So this is the concept of modern workplace, and many organizations across the globe are heavily investing on this, and that is what is driving the success of Office 365. Okay, so let's move on. So of course, as I talk about all these solutions, right, a question comes in your mind about what about security, right? Because all these things or all these tools or all these offerings which I talk about is really great, but what about security, right? You cannot have a solution which puts your security on risk, right? Your productivity as well as security goes hands on hand. You cannot have something which is really intrusive to your organization's security, and you cannot call that you're being productive, right? It's quite possible that your data can get into wrong hands, and you do not want that happening. So that is a question in your mind, right? What about security? So in the past, we had this concept called as firewall, right? We were running all the on-premises solutions, maybe on-premises solutions of your SharePoint, Exchange. You had your own data centers wherein you'll be installing all the necessary enterprise applications you would need. It could be Skype for Business, it could be Exchange, SharePoint. You had to build all those servers, right? You would have, so everything was under your control, right? And that was how we used to be secure in the past. And with the introduction of cloud, now there is few boundaries, but more data and more complexity. So this is the problem that we are facing, right? So because the challenge with Office 365 is, right, of course you have all these great solutions around you, right? But you really don't understand what happens to your data when it leaves your network, right? So you're sending an email, right? Maybe you're sharing a document with someone else using your external sharing functionality in SharePoint, right? Or maybe you don't get to understand what happens to the data when it leaves my mailbox or when it leaves my network, right? So the problem is, how do we enable productivity without compromising security? And this is a burning question in every person's mind. So it's a delicate balance between productivity and security, right? So we are going to understand how Office 365 is going to help us to address these needs. And if you think about today's market, there are so many solutions in the market to help you be productive, right? I mean, for your security, right? It could be your mobile device management solutions, the ones which I spoke about, such as your AdWatch, Mobile Iron, and things like that. You could talk about SIEM, you could talk about CASB, you could talk about, there are so many players, there are so many vendors when it comes to this, right? And the market is quite confusing, right? When you're having a POC call, mostly as a part of my role is basically to take care of SharePoint and Office 365. And recently I started shifting gears, and I mainly focus more on the security piece of Office 365, where I closely work with CISOs or InfoSec people and all those kind of stuff. And when we get into a POC call with different vendors, maybe CASP, for that reason, I've been exploring vendors such as Oracle, SkyHigh, and when it comes to other solutions, I've been exploring FireHigh and all their offerings are really good, but at times it gets confusing. You really don't understand which one you want to use, right? And that is where your Office 365 comes into picture, because It is one single solution which can give you all these things together, right? So that is the beauty of Office 365, because once you have bought this complete productivity suite along with EMS, everything is inbuilt and everything is empowered with AI and machine learning, right? So with this, you get to protect at the front door, you get to protect the threats at the front door. You can protect your data anywhere, even after it leaves your network, and you can detect and remediate attacks. So this is the offering, or this is what is really coming up with a great tool such as Office 365. So as we speak more in today's session, I'm going to help you guys understand what are the tools or what are the offerings which Office 365 has given you, which you can take advantage of and make sure that your data is secure in rest as well as in transit. Okay. So the mobile first, cloud first reality, because as Microsoft's CEO Satya Nadella rightly said, right? So we are living in a world where it is mobile first, cloud first, right? So we all want to get done. We all want to get our work done on the go, right? So 72% of mobile devices, so 72% of US workforce will be on mobile by 2020, relying on devices other than their laptop to be more productive. So one way of seeing this is today you could see many organizations wherein there are many field engineers who are on the go. They don't really sit and they don't really have a cubicle, right? Of course, we are IT pros. We do have a cubicle, but that's not the case when it comes to a manufacturing industry, or that's not the case when it comes to, a healthcare industry. We have people who are on the go. They don't really have a cubicle for them, but they still want to get their work done, right? So what Microsoft says is by 2020, 72% of the US workforce will be mobile, and 63% of confirmed data breaches involved weak default or stolen passwords. This is something which everyone would agree to, because most of the time we do not really have a, a strong password set, right? We do not, our credentials are not really strong enough. And of course, shadow IT. And so let me ask you this question, folks. So what do you think about shadow IT, or what is your understanding when I say shadow IT? Of course, that's a common terminology which is used across the industry today, but what do you, or what strikes your mind when I say shadow IT? Can I get some answers on the chat? When I say shadow IT, what reminds you? Anything, folks? Okay, that's fine. So let me take the lead here. So shadow IT is nothing but using solutions or using apps which is not approved by the IT team of your organization. It's that simple. So for an example, let's say my organization bought Office 365 and every employee has been given a license and everyone gets to enjoy OneDrive for Business, right? So we have OneDrive for Business, you're uploading all your data there and you have external sharing enabled and you're sharing content. But for any given reason, right, you are taking advantage of your Google Drive or Box, even those are cloud storages, but they are not approved by the IT team of your organization, right? So when you're doing things like that or taking advantage of or a SaaS solution, or it could be anything of that matter, right, and you're uploading your corporate data to that, that is called a shadow IT. And we are going to see how Office 365 can help you address shadow IT and how it can help you make sure that you're not compromised. All right, so let's move on. Okay, now that I have given the problem, right, now that we have understood, like, this is a problem that we are really facing in today's world with all these cloud solutions around us, right? And whatever I described, it could be applicable to Azure also to some extent, right? But today our focus is on Office 365, and I believe most of you folks would agree that of course this is a real problem that we are facing, right? Now let's try to get into the details and understand how Microsoft, with a solution called as Office 365, is going to help us address all these challenges. Okay, so let's move on. So defense in-depth multidimensional approach, right? So before I even talk further, let me help you understand what this really means by showing you something on the internet, right? So today I go in and I say Office 365 plans, right? It's going to take me to all the Office 365 plans. Let's say I go here. And these are all the offerings that you have, right? So these are all the services, right? I get into more details. It's going to tell me you get blah blah blah, all those things, right? I want to click on learn more. Let's go with this. Okay, go all the way down. So this is the piece which I'm talking about, security. So this is what I'm going to talk for the next few minutes. I'm going to help you understand how Microsoft helps to make sure that your data is really protected. What are the built-in controls, or what are the security parameters which Microsoft has built in within their data centers, their Office 365 data centers, to ensure that their customers' data is secure and safe, right? So, and whatever I'm going to talk under this defense in depth approach, it's true for all the SKUs, it's true for all the plans, which means it doesn't mean that maybe you're on E1 you don't get to enjoy it, or maybe you're on E5 you get to enjoy. That's not the case. No matter whatever you are, you're into small scale or large enterprise, whatever plans you're consuming, the defense in depth approach is applicable to you. Maybe once I'm done with this few minutes of talk on this, you guys can come back later and read in detail about this, and it'll make much more sense to you. Okay, so let's move ahead. So of course, all the pieces which you see on those diagrams there, when you think about it in different bits and pieces, it may not really make sense, but when they are put together, they would really add value much, right? So let's see how. So it begins, so these are the Office 365 data centers across the globe. And I believe most of you folks understand, or most of you folks know, to see where exactly your data is kept at. If at all you folks are not aware, let me also show you that. You just Google Office 365 data centers, data center locations, and you want to see this map, right? So this is where you get to understand where your data is kept. So you're going to select your geo. For me, I belong to an European organization, right? So I see this. So this is where my data is kept, right? So one moment. So from here, it's either Ireland, where in Ireland you have all these services configured, and the next one is going to be, so this area is going to be the Netherlands, is going to be your redundancy, is going to be your secondary. So with this, you folks can tell where your data lives, and as rightly said here, it is just the country which is given, and Microsoft doesn't reveal the exact city where your data is kept, because it is a multi-tenant environment, and on the same data center where your data is kept, you have other customers' data as well. So it's not possible for Microsoft to reveal those information. So in fact, few weeks back, we were having a discussion with Microsoft. Due to compliance regions, we wanted to know where our OneDrive data is kept, and we were not given that information. Okay. So let's talk in detail. So these are the data center details. You folks could just go here and understand that, right? And so it begins with the physical layer, with the physical security layer, right? So once you enter your data center, I believe any one of you who has visited a data center would understand how the level of security which is done there. You just do not blindly get into a data center. There are various levels of security, or there is various level of background checks which you have to go through to get access to a data center. It begins with the physical layer, right? And you have this. So when you consider the data center themselves in Microsoft, right, it's not possible for anyone to blindly enter that. No background noise, just give me 1 minute. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so it starts with the physical security layer, so which means every data center of Microsoft, which is meant for Office 365, has fire suppression, perimeter security, and multi-factor authentication. So what I mean by this is, let's say for any given reason, any engineer who has to get into the data center for any maintenance work, or it could be for anything. Maybe it could be a bad simple reason that he has to just do some cabling work, or he has to replace a rack, or he has to install a new server. It could be anything of that matter. He has to make sure that he's going through a multi-factor authentication, and everything that engineer is doing within the data center gets monitored. So it's monitored to such an extent that, let's say you get access to the physical server itself, right? For any given reason, you wouldn't be given to the application layer, which means to the applications or the OS which is installed in that server. And it is vice versa once again. So any engineer who goes in for the maintenance work on the application level, let's say for the SharePoint application which is installed on it, or maybe it could be anything to do with the operating system, so that guy, he doesn't get access to the physical servers themselves, right? So that's the level of monitoring which happens inside, and that's the level of security which happens within these data centers, right? And Let's see further. And when it comes to network, right, and let's understand how secure their network is, right? This diagram, I believe most of you folks would be either SharePoint or Exchange. So just see this from this beginning, right? So maybe this, you're trying to access a SharePoint site from your laptop and from your mobile device. Let's consider that this is the front end front end, and this is the back end. So even what happens within that is, right, so every request which goes to the Microsoft data centers from, if let's say you want to access a document, let's say you're trying to make some API calls or whatever it is, right? It goes through only these secure protocols, right? So this is a front end layer, it talks here. And even the security between this boundary from your front end within your back end, even here there are only certain level of ports which is opened, and they have very strict level of security which is configured even in this area. So it's not possible that you have all the ports opened, or random ports open, that your data could be on breach. That's not the case. Even these ports are monitored. So that's how it is when it comes to the network level of security within the data centers. And when it comes to host, when I say host, these are the hosts or the computers which are kept on the data center for management work, or it could be hosting the data, or it could be anything of that matter, right? So Microsoft makes sure that they are patched frequently. It has all the malware protection in place, and it's auditing for all operate access and action. So whatever happens within those host machines is being audited. Let's say, for instance, it's not possible for any engineer who goes into the data center to blindly open a browser and download some malware. You even have some app locker controls into it. You're only meant to do what you're meant to do, and whatever you're doing gets audited. And even the other interesting piece which I read earlier today is, let's say you go in, and your work is supposed to and maybe as a part of your work you're supposed to access only one single server. So you're going to give in with this crazy 26 characters weird alphanumeric password, which is just one time password, and the moment you enter it, you're going to have access only to that single server. It's not lateral that you can use that password for all the servers in the data center. That's not the case, right? So that's the level of security which you get inside. And when it comes to security development lifecycle, of course, there is a huge book on this part, but I'm not going to spend so much of time talking about the security development lifecycle. But this is the level of security which they have on the hosts, and you have automated tool for routine activities, right? So let's say that is an activity which has to happen once in a week, or once in a day, or once in a month, or once in 6 months. Microsoft makes sure that even that is automated, and you do not want any manual intervention for that. And zero standing permissions in the service. No one from Microsoft would have any standing permissions to the data centers, or to the servers which is kept into the data centers, or to the applications. So every time you have to go through these background checks, and every time you need to make sure that you're gonna give in with all those passwords, that one-time password, and only then you get access to that. So sometimes it's quite a possibility that someone has to really get into the data center, and the reasons for that could be anything. Let's say uh, in case of SharePoint, because we all know when it comes to SharePoint Online, your data is, you have only 14 days of backup, and anything which is beyond that, Microsoft says that you can't get it, right? So I'm getting a question, I suppose. So this is what happens here. So with Lockbox access, so what happens here is, any future, so what happens is, sometimes it's quite a possibility that you really have to get into the data center. Let's say with the SharePoint, you just get 14 days of backup, right? And anything which goes beyond that, it's quite a possibility that you should ask Microsoft for an engineer to go in, and you really have to collect all those information and come out, right? So maybe they have to really go into the get all the SQL backups, tapes outside of it, and they really need to get the stuff. So it's quite a possibility that at times people has to go in, right? So that's what is called as Lockbox. And in that case, when you want to prompt for an access, this is what happens, right? So you're requesting, saying that I need to get access into the data center because I want to do this work, right? And this is going to trigger two things, which is nothing other than, you're going to be checked whether you're really employed from Microsoft, whether you belong to the right business unit or not, and then it is going to kick a request to your manager, and your manager is the one who's going to approve, and that is when you get into the data center and do all your work. So this is what Logbox is all about. And administrators, because as this is something which I already covered, they have to go through all these background checks, account management, all the training policies and awareness which they have to take once in a year. Okay. And when it comes to data, because end of the day, even though it's on a cloud, it is sitting on a hard drive which is sitting on the Microsoft's data center, right? So there is data isolation for different customers because it's a multi-tenant environment, right? On the same data center where your data is living, you'll be having multiple customers data living, so you have isolation between all these data and data encryption as well. So this is the level of isolation, right? So it's the data is not really mingled. There are different hard drives which is kept within that. And data at rest as well as data in transit, which means it could be your data. When I say at rest, it could be SharePoint, or it could be your Exchange, or anything of that matter. And when I say data at transit, let's say your data is supposed to move from one data center to a different data center, right? Even in transit, your data is encrypted. And when I say encryption, it's using AES 265. So that's the algorithm, and that's what the level of encryption which just really gets into the which really happens when it comes to encryption. So recently, I believe most of you folks understand this concept called as encrypted threaded storage, right? So this is something which was introduced on SharePoint 2013, and that is even applicable for SharePoint Online. I think on 2014 is when they introduced this concept for encrypted threaded storage for even for SharePoint Online, and that is really an exciting piece. Let me show you what happens with that. Right, so if at all, you most of the time the question which comes to you is how secure is my data when it is on SharePoint Online. So let's see how encrypted threaded storage helps to encrypt your data, right? Let's say you're uploading a document to a document library, and anybody who knows encrypted threaded storage, the concept behind that is you're uploading a document of 1 MB of file, it gets stored as a single chunk. Let's say you're uploading a document of 20 MB file, it gets split into multiple chunks and it gets stored across different places. It's not one single piece, right? It doesn't get stored in one single content database or in that exact table. It gets split into the multiple chunks and it gets stored. So let's say you're uploading a document, and this document gets split into different chunks, and each of these chunks has a key for it. It's encrypted with a key, right? And what happens next is, so all these saves which you're seeing there are the Azure containers, right? So, and all these Azure containers has a separate set of keys, so which is given by the key store. So the key store is something which offers all these keys, right? So you get all these keys from here, and all these safe logs have these keys given to them, right? And then the document gets stored into different chunks. All these different chunks, it gets stored in these Azure safe containers, right? And as I already said, all these safe containers themselves has a separate set of key, right? And we keep going once again, and what happens is there is a key which is offered, and this is the second level of encryption which happens with the master key, right? All the keys get configured here, and all these keys get stored in the content database. So anybody who's been working as a SharePoint administrator, you know that your data gets stored on the content database. So this is what happens here. Now the beauty about this is, let's say there is a breach, let's say there is a malicious admin or a hacker who wants to hack into it. Let's see how that's been prohibited, right? Or how that's been stopped. Let's say there is a hacker who gets access to your content DB, right? It's quite a possibility that he could get access, but the problem there is these are just metadata which is sitting, because all these chunks, right, all these data get split into different chunks and they're getting stored on these Azure safe containers here, and the content DB just is a metadata which is pointing to all those containers. So even if he gets access to this, he can't do anything. And let's say if there is someone else, let's say there is someone, I think Tom Cruise shows up from the ceiling there. So let's say someone gets access to your Azure safe containers, right? So even in that case, these are just different chunks there, and all these documents would be pointing to all these content DBs, and he won't really have access to the key store, so he can't do anything with that. And let's say for any given reason, if someone gets access to the key store himself, it is just a bunch of keys, and he wouldn't really understand what to do with those keys, because these it is something like, let's say you had access to a bank vault with all the keys, and all these keys are unlabeled. You really don't know which key is meant for which safe. So that's the level of security, or that's the level of encryption which Microsoft follows for all your data. Okay, so that's about the defense in-depth approach piece, right? And so that is more of what happens within the data centers, right? So, and that's how Microsoft secures all your data. Now let's really focus on the core agenda today, which is nothing but the Office 365 compliance offerings, right? So this is split across different categories, such as your identity and access management, which is protecting your data at the front door itself. And then you have your threat protection piece, which takes care of all your malicious detection and all those kind of stuff. And then you have your information protection, which is nothing but the AIP, because as I already said in the before, you really need to have an insight on what happens to your data once it leaves your network, right? So with AIP, you could solve that. And then you have security management, right? So this is sort of for the complete landscape. And then the compliance solutions such as your GDPR. I in fact saw a question on GDPR. I'll make sure that I'll tell you what GDPR is and how your Office 365 or Microsoft 365 can help to drive your GDPR compliance, right? And these are the different security and compliance offerings that we have under this umbrella, right? So under threat protection, we have your EOP, your Exchange Online, your Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection, your Office 365 Threat Intel, which is nothing but the intelligence which is running on behind of it. Under information protection, you have a DLP and Office Message Encryption, and even AIP comes under that category. Under security management, it is nothing but it is a whole view of how you see it, right? You have the Office 365 Cloud App Security, which is Microsoft's own native CASB, and then you even have Secure Score. And when it comes to compliance solutions, you have the Advanced Data Governance, e-discovery, Customer Logbox, and the newly released Compliance Manager. Now let's see in detail about what these solutions mean. And of course, all these solutions are meant to address the cyber threats that we are seeing in today's world. So this is the kind of threat which is happening across us, and this is just a random figure which Microsoft is giving us. Okay. So anybody or has anyone explored the Microsoft Intelligence Security Graph, or does anybody have an understanding of what the Intelligence Security Graph is? Anybody who has an understanding of what the Intelligence Security Graph does, or how Microsoft detects all our work or all the anomalies which is happening? Okay, so Microsoft has this tool or this solution which is built is called as your Intelligence Security Graph. All right. So basically what it does is it is an intelligence engine which is running on Microsoft's data centers, right? And what Microsoft does with all these things is it keeps scanning all your work, all your device, from which IP address you're logging in, from which location you're logging in, and what is that you're doing, right? Let's say today there is a possibility that let's say today from India, I'm logging into a SharePoint online site, and 5 minutes from now I'm logging in from US, or 5 minutes from now I'm logging in by China. And it's quite possibility that's quite a possibility that it's not possible for me to be present in two different locations physically, right? That is, maybe you could argue with me saying that, Vignesh, what if I log into a server which is on US and I try to log in from that? Well, that's a different argument altogether. But as I said, this is an intelligence engine, folks. Okay, so it's not really that smart enough, right? And with this graph or with this tool, Microsoft is looking into 450 billion user authentications every month. When I say 450 billion, these are all the users who are using Office 365. So what really happens behind the screen is it really does a machine learning. It builds a profile for all these Office 365 users, and it tries to understand their behavior, from where exactly they're logging in, which mobile device they use, which IP they use, right? And if at all it detects some anomalies or some abnormal behavior, it marks it as a risk and it says that, hey, something else is happening there. Maybe this guy is doing something malicious or something is wrong. You better go take a look at it, right? Or it is gonna stop you and tell you that I think this is not a normal behavior. You better go ahead and enter this. You better go ahead and give in your multi-factor authentication, right? It's going to prompt you for that because it sees that this is not a normal behavior. You're not logging in from the same IP as you logged in yesterday, right? And it is also looking into 1 billion Windows devices, right? And 400 billion emails analyzed for spam and malware. So this is what is happening with this intelligence, which is built by Microsoft. So when it comes to the offerings themselves, we have the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center. Maybe on the demo part, I'll walk you guys through that. I'll help you understand what are the parameters you get to see on the Security and Compliance Center, right? So me, as a part of my work, every day once I log in, I spend quite some time going to the security and compliance center, and I need to make sure that everything is really normal and I don't see any alerts for the policies which I've configured. I need to make sure that nothing abnormal is happening, right? Maybe on the demo part, when I'm showing you the security and compliance center, you folks will get to understand the controls in that, and that will give you a better insight of how to take advantage of that. And then we have the ATP, which is nothing but your advanced threat protection for Office 365, right? So with Office, it secures your entire environment from today's most advanced and sophisticated threats, right? As technology improves, right, as all this technology improves, all these new solutions comes into picture, it's quite a possibility that also the threats is improving. We get more advanced threats, right? And we need to make sure that we are running an advanced CAN engine which is capable enough or smart enough of capturing all these advanced threats, and the ATP is mainly built with that focus. Okay, for anybody who has been using ATP, maybe it was introduced on 2015 if my memory serves me well. So initially it was only meant for exchange, right? And then sometime in 2016 or 2017 is when they introduced that for Office clients, specifically your Visio and your Office clients were making use of it. So recently, few months back, I believe roughly 3 to 4 months back, is when ATP was introduced for SharePoint Online, your OneDrive for Business, your Microsoft Teams, and also for Office Pro Plus, right? So your ATP is going to scan everything, and it is going to tell you if something malicious is happening. Maybe in the demo part, I'll help you understand what's really happening and how ATP catches all your threats. So this is just to understand, or if you folks are new to ATP, this is a small pictorial representation of what was the reason behind Microsoft building this Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection, right? So the folks whom you see towards this right-hand side, all these people, they are people who are in Office 365, right? And then you have a graph which shows your effectiveness and latency. So let's get into the details and understand. Before that, okay. So it began on 2014, right? So on 2014 is when what Microsoft really started thinking about this. So what happened was, of course, threat has been there right from the time when computer came into picture, right from the time when we all started using technology, right? So in those days, maybe on 2014, what happened was we used to have AV engines, such as the AV engine which is installed in your laptop or in your computer. It could be any antivirus, right? So those were the ones which were used to capture all the threats, right? And it was okay, it was fairly okay. And because as you guys know, not every antivirus software is meant to capture all the threats, right? So that's the way it works. For instance, let's say if Bitdefender is smart enough of capturing a specific threat, that's not the same case with Kaspersky, and it is just vice versa, right? So initially that we were heavily relying on AV engines, and in 2015 Microsoft came up with this concept called as that's when they realized that for advanced threats, right? So threats which are really brand new, which are really sophisticated, which could really cause a heavy damage to the business, right? So that's when they realized that we need to build something which is really smart enough to address all those needs, because in Office 365 your data sits within them, right? It could be SharePoint, Exchange, your chats, whatever. And Microsoft started building this feature called as ATP. And what happens is they introduced this feature called as safe attachments and safe links in 2015. And what safe attachment does is anytime there is an email which is getting triggered to you with an attachment on it, right? What Microsoft folks used to do, or what Microsoft is doing, is they have built their own sandboxed virtualized environment which is meant for safe attachments. So what they do is they take the attachment outside, they try to scan it, and they try to see, or they try to understand what that attachment does to the environment. If they find that there is something malicious, if they find that there is something wrong, they make sure that that attachment is stopped and now it doesn't reach your inbox. So that is what happened with safe attachment. And similar with safe links. Let's say there is any link in your email, or there is any link which is malicious which you're using on a chat or something. Microsoft used to make sure that they are taking that to their virtual environment, they understand, or they click on that link and they understand the reputation of that link, and if they find that there is something which is really malicious, they make sure that that link is being blocked. So this is how in 2015 they started up with ATP, and Microsoft realized that this is really interesting, right? They really understood that maybe we should focus more, because all these while, or all these things, they are really focusing on taking this attachment, putting it in their virtual environment, and then scanning it. So in the year 2016, Microsoft started investing more on ATP, wherein that is when they built concepts such as your heuristic clustering. So what happens with this is any email or any chat or anything for that, once you have ATP built, right? And if there is an attachment coming in that email, everything gets pointed out to these safe attachment virtual environment, wherein everything which goes there, it gets scanned, it gets monitored, and if Microsoft feels that something is malicious there, it makes sure that that is blocked. So that is called as your uh, that the heuristic clustering model which they had on top of it, right? And with dynamic email delivery, let's say an email is sent to you with an attachment, only the email body reaches you first. Hey, there is an attachment, something, and then an email comes to you saying that you have received an email with an attachment. Please hang on for a few minutes because we are scanning the content on it, and maybe in few minutes or few seconds you would get the attachment of that email. So Microsoft makes sure that it is scanned and nothing which is really holding some malicious content reaches your inbox. And with zero hour auto purge, what happens is, let's say for any given reason you your mailbox landed up with some malicious content, right? It's quite a possibility that even later they can go ahead and back it out using your zero hour auto purge, right? So that is the kind of security measures which Microsoft inbuilds with this threat protection. And then in the year 2017 they had malware fish quarantines, right? So in this, you don't need to do absolutely anything, right? So if they find something malicious, it is automatically going to get into your quarantines, right? And with fish, it is like an email address or a mail body which looks so authentic or which it looks so genuine that it's quite possibility for anybody to go ahead and respond to that email or for anybody to click on that link, right? So Microsoft sees all those patterns and they build this malware fish quarantine so that anything which is such kind of malicious, it automatically gets quarantined to that. And then on the year 2017 H2 is when they built ATP, and as I rightly said before, ATP was introduced for your SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and Microsoft Teams, right? And in addition to that, recently with the Microsoft Intelligence Security Graph, they started incorporating this even with Windows Defender AV protection, right? With advanced threat protection. So Windows Defender is something which is running on your Windows 10 laptops, right? So what happens is any malicious or anything which is found on Office 365 would be given to the Windows 10 Advanced Threat Protection, and anything which comes from that endpoints which will be given to Office 365. So it is multiplying the security measures. So whatever they learn on Windows 10 side, it is given here, and whatever they learn from Office 365 side is given to the Windows 10 piece. So which doubles your security from the OS level as well as from the application level. And threat intelligence, as we already said, it leverages the Microsoft Intelligence Security Graph, which I showed you before, which analyzes billions of data points from Microsoft Global Centers, Office clients, email, user authentication, signals. This is basically an intelligence engine which is running on your Office 365. And Office 365 as a service is ingested with this intelligence engine. It understands all your patterns, it does a study analysis, it captures your behavior analysis, and you have this central threat intelligence piece built on top of it. And then your DLP, most of us know the solution has been around in Exchange itself, in Exchange on-premises for quite some time. And even I believe SharePoint 2016 on-premises version has a DLP, right? Which means that it is protecting your data. It's quite a possibility that you're sharing confidential data inadvertently. In that case, you need something which stops that for your info. Just for example, let's say you're sharing your credit card number, right, over an email which is not at all agreed. So in that case, your DLP can come into picture and you can make sure that you're sharing something which is really sensitive, or you're sharing an information over the corporate network which is not at all approved. So those kind of controls can be possible with DLP. Right? And Azure information protection. So this is going to help you to classify your data, right? Let's say you're working on a PowerPoint presentation or some confidential information, right? And you want to make sure that it is going to leave your network. You're going to send it to a client outside. You want to make sure that the customer, he doesn't download it, or maybe he doesn't print it, or he doesn't mishandle it on any possible ways. So you have AIP controls which can help you from printing it, from downloading it, right, or from forwarding it to someone else. So we have even those kind of controls with AIP. And then the data governance. So what happens with this is, right, so it's quite a possibility for an organization that employees come in and employees leave out, right? And it's quite possible that you're having the information of an employee who already left your organization. and it's quite complex, that it's a balance. You need to make sure that what is the data that you're supposed to keep, and what is the data that you're supposed to archive, or more, what is the data that you're supposed to delete. And your data governance is going to help with that. You have your advanced what you have this solution called as advanced data governance, which is inbuilt within Office 365, right? You could even import all the content from your on-premises SharePoint or Exchange, and this is going to run an intelligence engine on the backend, and it is going to tell you like, hey, these are the data which you're not supposed to be keeping, or these are the data on which you need to have AIP configured. Maybe as we show you a demo about this on the later sessions, you guys will understand in detail about this and how this can help to enhance your controls. Okay, so secure score, I believe most of you folks might be actively using this, right? So this is basically an analytics tool which is built on Office 365, which gives you an insight on how exactly you're secure, or what are the best practices you're following. Are you really following the best practices, right? Or is all the data in your Office 365 environment really safe, or is something going wrong, right? So those kind of analytics can be given with the secure score analytics tool. And your European GDPR. So I saw someone asking this question about GDPR. So this is nothing but it stands for General Data Protection Regulation. So what happened was, I believe roughly a year back, the European government came up with this law, which mainly speaks about how data can be, let's say, as a part of Office 365, that is, or as a part of any organization. Let's say you're joining a company and the HR collects a lot of information about you, such as your PAN card number or your Aadhaar card. Maybe in the US, it's your social security number, and there is a lot of personal information which is captured. And what this law says is, what are the informations which you're allowed to capture? And even if you're capturing all those informations, how do you make sure that the PII, the personal information, is secured? Right? It's not possible that any person's or any employee's personal information gets into wrong hand, and that is what your GDPR talks about. Okay, and there is a tool called as Compliance Manager, which Microsoft has built as a part of your Office 365 suite, which you can take advantage of, driving the GDPR. Maybe when I show you a demo of the tool, you folks would understand. And any organization which is failing to comply with that, so May 25th is the deadline, I guess. You need to make sure that within 25th you make sure that your GDPR is taken care of. So this basically comes under the compliance folks. Yes, even in our organization we have the compliance team who's mainly looking into this, and if you're not complying with that, it is 20 million euros or 4% of your global turnover which you need to pay as fine. So this is the compliance manager tool. I'll definitely show you a demo on this. And so mobile secure and happy, if at all you want to work from mobile devices, you have the Intune, which helps with that. And the EMS piece, which gives you your Azure Active Directory P1, P2, the Azure Active Directory premium plans along with the EMS. Okay. And conditional access, wherein only based on certain conditions you would be given access to the resources, right? Let's say if all these conditions are met, if he's a privileged user, credentials is found in public, all these things, it's going to mark the user as risk, or it's going to say that this session is risky, and it is going to prompt you for these: allow access or not, require MFA, force a password reset, deny access, or limit access. This is what you call as conditional access. In the later sessions, which is coming either on part 2 or part 3, I'll be giving you a detailed demo on how conditional access is. Okay, so this is demo time. I believe we've been done a lot of talking, so let's get into the demos and understand what this really can do, and let's look into all these offerings. So I'm going to log into my Office 365 tenant. So this is my trial tenant, right? So we're going to be mainly focusing on the security and compliance piece here. So as I said, so me as a guy who's actively working on managing or taking care of Office 365 in my organization, so every day I spend quite some time going through the security and compliance center. So this is a single pane of glass view where you could see everything. Right, it begins from here. Threat management, you could search for users, right? Let's say in my tenant, let's say I search for me. This is here, and it gives me my summary, my recent activity, what I've been doing, right? It's loading here, I guess. let's come back here, and any recent alerts, which is okay. I think it loaded here. So it is going to tell me what are all the activities I've been doing, right? So, and if at all, so you can just search for a couple of people from here, and it's the compliance score. I in fact showed you folks the Office 365 secure score. Let me get into this. I'll just show you what this means for your organization. So earlier when secure score was this tool was announced, this analytics tools was announced, it was only the global admins who could have access to it. But today, I believe that no matter whatever role you hold in Office 365, such as your Exchange admin, SharePoint admin, or Skype for Business admin, you would still have access to the secure score. So this is basically an analytics tool which runs and it tells you and it gives you a score. So if you go here, these are all the controls, or these are all the baselines which we have currently. And let's say here it says enable MFA for all global admins, which means this it's considering this as a risk, and it wants me to enable multi-factor authentication for all the folks who have global admin privileges granted to them, because that is the highest level, that is the super level of account which you could have there. I need to make sure that you have MFA enabled, right? So this is what happens, and you have so many such things. And once you're making sure that it says enable MFA for all your users, right? And let's say once you're configuring this MFA, you would be given a score. Let's say the action score is 30, and you will see that be reflecting in your secure score. So this is how it works. So this is basically an analytics engine, and Microsoft doesn't guarantee that if you're making sure that you're following all the security measures here, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not at all in risk. That's not the case. That's not the understanding, right? This is just an analytics tool, and Microsoft is just giving you some insights that, hey, follow this, make sure that you have all the controls set. And if at all I get into the alerts, right? So let me talk about the threat management. So this is where the threat intelligence comes into picture. So with what happens is this threat intelligence makes sure that it is scanning. So it says that we have scanned your 13 messages has been scanned, right? And it says that it hasn't found anything malicious. It says that everything is authentic, everything is genuine, right? And this is what happens on a global level, global weekly threat detections. So it says that on a global level, this is what Microsoft has been scanning, right? And when I go to Explorer, you could export, let's say you have any malware, or because this is just basically a test tenant, you wouldn't be seeing much activity happening here. But maybe for our later sessions, I'll really configure things and I'll really show you, because I purposely wanted to make sure that in a session, in a real demo session, I'm configuring you folks on, and I'm really showing you what happens and how Office 365 threat intelligence is smart enough of capturing this, right? And if I go to the search and investigation piece, this is something which I already showed you folks, where you could run an audit log search and see what's been happening in your environment, right? And you could, and as of today, even Microsoft Teams has this audit log enabled. And let's say I want to see accessed file. I could do something of this sort, and it's gonna run this compliance, and it is, I'm sorry, accessed file. 1 minute, let me search. It's going to tell me so this particular user called Jayanti, she has been accessing these files, this IP address, and on this date, right? So if you see something malicious is happening, you could just come here and do a search on that specific user, right? You're even allowed to do a search on specific users, or you could, if at all you want to do an audit on a SharePoint site or a SharePoint folder or a specific file on SharePoint, you can put in that URL and you could do some audit search, right? And so this is one piece of it. And when it comes to alerts, view alerts. So with the policies which I have configured, it has captured, the DLP has captured 2 alerts, right? It says that notify users. Let me see, I should have got an email for this alert. Let me see what this alert really says, because I'm the administrator who has been configured this alert. So it says, so one is this Office 365 role membership. It says that this specific user has been given global admin privileges. So, and we are giving you this alert. So anybody who gets a global admin access, it will be throwing me an alert, right? And if we go here, so this person has shared a credit card information over an email, and it has given me an alert. DLP has captured that, and it says that you have configured a policy which says that DLP policy which says that users shouldn't be sharing their their credit card over emails. However, we found someone doing that, and I'm giving you this alert, right? maybe on the later sessions, I'll be showing you folks on how to configure it and how to go about it. Okay. And let me get into this. Security and compliance. So the service assurance, this is the page where you go ahead and you can get to understand about all the uh, compliance framework which Microsoft is following, such as in the US you have something called as the FISMA, and if at all you're a health organization you have something called as HIPAA, and in India you have ISO, you have GDPR, and the list goes on and on and on, right? And you could find all the information related to your service assurance, because you need to trust the solution, because you're using Office 365 and your entire contents lives there. So you could go here and see everything from here. All right, so let us move on. I'll be showing you a demo on the CASB, because that is something which I really wanted to show you folks, to show the intelligence of what it is. So, and with Office 365, we all agree that your data is moving, right? So your data is not really at rest. Maybe you're moving along and your data keeps moving as you use the data in Office 365. So this is just a small illustration by me to help you folks understand like how your data moves when you're using Office 365. Okay, so let's say this person is me. Okay, so maybe as a part of my business visit, I'm planning to move to Germany, right? And in my transit or in my journey, I want to make sure that I'm working for a customer's presentation and I want to be productive. I want to complete that presentation on the go. So let's see how Office 365 can help me with that. I'm boarding a cab from here to Bengaluru airport, which means, and this cab has internet enabled on it, so I can open my laptop, or from my mobile device I can open OneDrive or SharePoint. I can start working on those documents. I still keep going. I reached Bengaluru airport, and as you all know, every airport has a hotspot, so maybe I'm still connected, I'm still productive, I'm still doing my work. And then I take the flight, right? So as you know, most of the international airlines today, they are empowered with the internet, so you could still use internet even on the flight as well, which means that I'm still productive even on the flight. And then I have a layoff here at the Amsterdam airport. So even in that I could be productive, because even that has internet connectivity. I still keep going on, I take the next flight, so even it has internet access, and I reach the destination airport, which is Frankfurt, and even that has internet connectivity, and I'm still productive, right? And then I take a cab, which is productive. I reach my hotel, which has internet, and I'm still productive. So along the way of my journey, which roughly I believe this journey would take 12 to 13 hours from Bangalore to Frankfurt, right? And so I'm still productive, right? So that is how you get empowered with Office 365. So most of the organizations, I'm not sure how many of you folks have really been exploring CASB. If not, I would really urge you all to start looking into CASB, because this is very important, right? So this is what a CASB can do, right? So let me just give you a small crux of what CASB is all about, right? Say in Office 365, you have a lot of activities which is going on, and you have a lot of user auditing or logging activities which is happening, right? Either you need to go ahead and do a log search and understand what's happening, or you need to request Microsoft for certain logs, and I believe they're not going to share you that. So a CASB is nothing but it is just going to make all the API calls to Office 365, and it is going to give you all those logs in the form of a dashboard, in a form of a presentable view, so that you could go there and look it for yourself and understand. So that is what a CASB is all about. We call this as Cloud Access Security Broker, and this was as I said, a terminology which was coined by Gartner a few years back. So these are the 6 CASB vendors to consider. I'll just show you a small demo on the CASB tenant, which I've been playing around with. And if at all you're thinking about it, these are the most known vendors to go with. So the Oracle CASB, I'll just show you what this looks like. Of course, I won't be able to show you the complete information, but at least part of it. So this is basically test, which I'm using. So a CASB is nothing but basically the Oracle CASB is once again a SaaS solution. It is sitting on the cloud, right? So it is a cloud to cloud. From this tenant, it fetches all the information from my Office 365 and it shows you in a presentable view. So just watch the fun here, right? So this has been talking to my test tenant and it captures all this information. It says determined by anomalous or suspicious activity. It says everything is green there. But when it comes to this, it says users with most failed logins. It says these many users are with failed logins, right? And when it comes here, users with highest login activity. It says these are the users with highest login activity in your tenant. Suspicious and normal IP addresses, it sees that everything is regular, nothing is wrong there. Client and types, how people are accessing either from desktop or mobile or all these things. So these kind of loggings or these kind of auditings, of course, it's possible in Office 365. Either you need to write a script or you need to rely on the default Office 365 auditing logs. But with a CASB, it is just doing an API call and it is giving it to you in a presentable format. This tab, so it says that users with most logins, right? So users with most failed logins, maybe this could be interesting. So I mostly come here every day and I spend here and I see if I see is there something is wrong with this guy, because maybe it could be a person where he's trying to key in his wrong password, or maybe he changed his password and he forgot to change it on his mobile device and his mobile device is prompting for his new password. It could be anything, right? And I want to understand the top exchange admin activities. So maybe this is for exchange administrators. They want to know what people with admin roles are doing in their tenant. And if you go here, this shows you like the files accessed in OneDrive accessed most often, right? So files accessed or files downloaded most often, files modified most often. If you see that a specific file is being downloaded most often and you feel that there is something wrong which is happening there, maybe you could just write to that guy and ask what's happening there. Okay. And I won't be able to show you folks other controls due to security reasons, but then if at all you folks are interested, in the next couple of sessions I'll be having my own tenant of this and I'll help you folks understand, and this is where you configure things. And then we have the Microsoft Cloud App Security, which is nothing but this is a native CASB of Office 365, Microsoft themselves. Okay, so Microsoft has acquired this organization, I believe, which is called as Adalom. I think roughly a year back is when they acquired Adalom, which is an Italian organization. So once they partnered up with them, they started coming up with this concept called as CASB, which is, I'll show you how the Microsoft CASB looks like. It comes as a part of your EMS E5. If I go here, I get into admin, and so this comes as a part of your EMS E5, folks. You need to make sure that you have either EMS E5 or you're running a standalone plan of your cloud app security. This is available as standalone as well. So I go here, and as I said, this is the native CASB of Microsoft. So this is what happens. So even here it is going to monitor everything, right? So it feels I've got 3 alerts, and let me look into that. It says that activity from infrequent country. It sees that okay, that is the way you've been accessing this seems to be infrequent, right? And if I go back here, it says that these are the open alerts, right? So it has been monitoring so many activities. 24 accounts have been monitored, which means it has been monitoring almost everyone in my tenant. It's been monitoring what they have been doing. It gives me what roles they have been doing, what acts they have been accessing, right? And then if I go back, and it's not just this, a little confusion. How is cache tool is more than an analytics tool? When you say cache tool, are you talking about the CASB tool? Okay, see the analytics tool which I showed you before, which is the Office 365 Secure Score, that is basically an analytics engine, as I said. So if you look back into that, those are the pre-built measures which Microsoft has already keyed in, saying enable MFA, hey, enable do this, and those are all the baselines which is already configured. Okay, and it looks into your tenant and sees whether those controls have already been configured. If yes, it's going to rate you high. If no, it's just going to say you that it's going to rate you low there and say that, boss, you haven't done this, better go ahead and do it. And that is, as I said, that's an analytics engine. Whereas a CASB is real time. It captures all those information, all the loggings and everything, and it gives it to you in a presentable format. So if your question is, do I rely more on CASB or the analytics tool? My answer to you would be on rely more on CASB. And it is the user activities and even the app themselves. I can even focus on the apps, right? If I go here, I want to understand what's been happening on Microsoft OneDrive for Business, right? So this is, it gives the user's map, it gives me the info. So this should be interesting. Insights. So these are all the file types which I've been using within your OneDrive. Maybe it could be text, image, all those things, the files, all the files which has been playing around, which my users have been playing around using OneDrive, right? And accounts, it says these are the users who potentially have a OneDrive license given to them, and this is what they've been doing. A live activity, like what happens and how people have been accessing. Let's say I want to see this, or let's say I want to understand this, what happened here. If you see this, it's giving me so much of information. If I go here, it's telling me like which ISP, which user, which device type, which cloud provider. So everything has been given here. Maybe you folks should just configure this and start playing around in your trial tenant. And if you really feel that this is important for your business, you could say, if you see this is really fun, it even shows you which ISP. Here it says that it is ACT. You see this? It says that it is the ACT FiberNet. It gives you the IP address, what file has been accessed to. All those information is being given here. So this is what the default, this is, as I said, this is Microsoft's native CASB. And if you folks are interested, or if your business is interested in this kind of a solution, I'll definitely urge you folks, go take a look at it and understand this to yourself. All right. And so I already spoke to you folks about the cloud app security. And let me also remind you that it is just not only Microsoft applications, right? You could also go ahead and add other apps as well. Let's say, for instance, your Dropbox, right? You could go ahead and add different apps. There are so many apps which is available. If you go here, you can select your apps based on different levels, right? You can select the category and CRM. It could be box or anything. And let's say you want to understand how your organization is being, how users are using that, even those can be monitored from here. And so SIEM, so this is one of the old native technologies. This is once again for logging, for I believe most of the organizations would be using SIEM, security incident event management. So this is basically used to collect all your logs from SaaS, from your proxies, from your firewalls, from your on-premises solutions, everything, and it gives you in a single pane of a glass view, right? So the CASB, which you see now, is a more enhanced or advanced version of SIEM. It works hands on hand with that. It is just that these CASB vendors, which you see now in market, they take advantage of this, and this is basically the backend, and they build all this rich UI on top of it. And you also have something called as MDR, managed detection and response. So I recently had an interest, or I recently worked with a customer for one of these vendors called as Palladian. So they offer the solution called as MDR, which is almost similar to your CASB, right? So here it takes care of your threat intelligence in action, security analytics, right? So threat anticipation, threat hunting, security monitoring. And on the other side, it has incident analysis, incident response, breach. So the first side is the proactive approach. The second side is the reactive approach, right? And so almost to most of the vendors to whom I spoke about, what I heard from them is many organizations now are showing more interest on Office 365, and everyone wants their Office 365 environment to be monitored either using a CASB or using an MDR. So if you folks are interested, please go ahead and talk to these folks, and I'm pretty sure your business or your customers would be happy about this solutions. And customer logbox, so anybody who's using an E5, I'm not sure how many folks know this. So what happens is, of course, there could be quite some reasons, like while you're working on Office 365, you have to raise a premier support case with Microsoft. Well, let's say something is broken in your environment or something is wrong for any given reason, right? And even you could have controls in such a place that you're raising a premier support case, the case engineer or the support engineer starts working on it, and let's say that guy has to access your data in the Microsoft data. Let's say he has to access it, right? It's not quite possible for him to blindly go ahead and access it, because before he goes ahead and do it using this customer logbox, he has to send you a request as a customer saying, hey boss, I want to access your stuff. Maybe as a part of the troubleshooting, I want to look into this content, right? Is it okay for me to do it? Please grant me access. So you'll be getting an email saying that, so the support engineer, he wants to do this and he's requesting for an access, and it is you as a customer who can approve or deny it. If you're okay with that, you could go ahead and approve it, and the support engineer is going to do his work, his troubleshooting, and it's done. And if you feel that you do not want to do that, you can completely go ahead and deny it. So that is, you have this as a part of your as a part of your Office 365 E5. So if you folks are interested, please go ahead and look into this as well. And these are the EMS licensing details. As I said, your EMS comes in two categories, your E3 and E5. And maybe later when I share you folks this slide, please go ahead and look into it. And so it depends on whatever you want, you can go ahead and buy it. Most of the organizations, as far as I know, they have EMS E3 along with their Office 365. If at all you want to feel that I want to take advantage of E5, it's totally up to you. So recap, so we've been talking a lot, and as I said, this is basically a primer session. I really didn't want to get into the details because all the offerings or all the tools which I showed you under security and compliance, these are huge topics. It's not possible for me to complete this in one single session because I really need to get into the hoods of it, help you folks understand how it is being configured, how you need to do it, and that is a lot which is happening there. Okay, so that's the reason I made sure that I'm just giving you an introductory session so that on the next sessions you guys would be able to understand like how to take advantage of all those solutions. So as a recap, we understood the security landscape, and we spoke about Office 365 and how this can help to drive the digital transformation in your organization. We understood what a modern workplace is, and we understood what's the problem that we are currently facing in a cloud first, mobile first world. In fact, we spoke about the defense in-depth multidimensional approach which Microsoft follows in their data center for Office 365 and how they secure data, and the security and compliance offerings which we have in Office 365. We spoke about all the AIP or ATP, threat intel, the cloud app security, and I also spoke about Oracle, CASB, and MDR, and yeah, of course, CASB, as I rightly pointed out there. So we are almost in the end of the session. So before I even close, so does anyone know about the red team and blue team in Microsoft? Guys, can I get that on the chat? The red team and blue team. Does anybody have an understanding of what the red team is and what a blue team is in Microsoft? Okay, so what happens, folks, in Microsoft? They are running all these cloud solutions such as your Azure, your Office 365, and all those kind of stuff, right? So within internally in Microsoft, they have something called as red team and blue team. So I see someone saying red is Azure. So it is not just for Azure, they even have that for Office 365 now, right? And so what happens is the red team is nothing but these are highly skilled hackers whom you get in the market today. These are world-class hackers. They know how to hack into any system, no matter how secure it is, no matter what level of security message you're following, right? These guys know how to hack into the system. So their job is to sit and hack into all the Azure data centers or Office 365 data centers, get access to all the C, and these are internally Microsoft folks, right? So the reason behind them doing this is, of course, there is a bunch of people out there, hackers, who are just going to do the same thing as these folks are doing, and Microsoft started following this concept called as assume breach. Let's say there is a breach which is really happening, and how do we act to it, right? And on the contrast, we have the blue team. So those guys are the defenders. So whatever malicious activity or whatever attacks is coming from the red team, those guys, it's not just from the red team, or even if it is coming from globally, right? These guys are the ones who sit internally within Microsoft and they try to control it and they try to respond it. And that is an interesting video about this. It is there in my slide. I have given you the link. You guys can go ahead and look into that later. And most of the time when any threat comes in, and even if it is from the red team, the blue team folks won't get to know it. They won't really understand that this is something which is happening from the red team. So they are just gonna start working on this and they're gonna see about how they can protect it. So this is really an interesting stuff. This is something which is inbuilt within the red team and blue team, right? And so this is what the red team does. Maybe later when I share this slide, you guys can go ahead and take a look at it, right? And as I said, this is what they do. And then the blue team is something on the opponent side. They go ahead and react to all those things and make sure that nothing is getting hacked or nothing is getting compromised, right? And there is in fact a video which I managed to capture. So there is an activity called as one hunt, which happens internally within Microsoft between the red team and blue team folks, where they really come together, and it is like a real time drill where these guys start to hack and how the blue team sort of responds. So in my recording, I'll be adding that video as well because it's not possible for me to play this video in a webinar. So I really urge you folks to go ahead and see that video. It's really exciting, and you really get to understand that these kind of activities which Microsoft is doing is really so cool. So it's time to conclude, and the conclusion is You have to evaluate security and compliance not as an expense, but as a money saver. Sure, managing compliance takes resources, but it's nowhere near as expensive as the cost associated with a breach. And I believe most of you folks would agree to this statement because, of course, having all these controls in place, it's going to cost you a dime. But for any given reason, if you're not going to do it, you're going to be in really big trouble, right? So that's what I want to tell as a part of this session. And these are some useful links which I really want you folks to go ahead and read it for yourselves, right? And once I share these slides later with you folks, you guys can go ahead, read into these links and understand about it. And so what's coming next? So we have part 2, part 3, part 4, and this is where I'm really going to get into the nuts and bolts of each and every single offering that we spoke about. So EOP, ATP, Threat Intel, GDPR, Compliance Manager, DLP. So there is a lot that we want to talk about. And in fact, if there is something else which you folks feel that, hey Vignesh, would you be able to also show us a demo or talk about this, some specific offering which Microsoft is giving, right? I'll definitely try to do that as well, right? So this is what is coming next. And thank you so much for joining my session, folks. I understand that there's been a lot of talking, slide work, and I managed to show you a few demos. But on the upcoming sessions, we'll definitely be showing more on the demo piece, and I'll help you folks understand how to configure it. So I'm happy to take questions now. So yeah, I'll be definitely sharing the video on the red team and blue team. That's definitely there, right? So I'll definitely be sharing that. And